What's up guys, it's Justin here, and today I've got 13 phones in front of me that came out in 2017, and I just really want to sit down and talk about some of my favorite ones, but also mentioning a couple phones that had some unique features that kind of set the tone as to what we should expect in smartphone trends this year. This year was definitely a very busy and important year for many manufacturers, and I think for the most part, all of the phones that you saw released in 2017 were pretty solid in one way or another, with only very few of them being so bad to the point where I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I think a lot of the phones that I'm going to mention today do have one feature that kind of stands out and allows me to recommend it to a certain type of person, but there's definitely a couple that really stand out and lead in multiple categories. So many phones came by this year that I pretty much lost track of all the phones that I had to review, and there's still a couple that I do have to review, but I've had every single one of these phones for at least a month now, so I can give you guys a good opinion. I'm also going to give away one of these guys mentioned in this video, so all you have to do to enter is make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on this video, and also leave a comment down below about your favorite smartphone feature, what you expect to see in 2018, or just your favorite phone from 2017, and I'll be announcing a winner over on my Twitter and Instagram page in 2 weeks from today. I'm also going to leave a link to all the phones I mentioned down in the description section below. So of course, the most talked about phone this year was from Apple, and that is the Apple iPhone X and what is currently my daily driver. There's definitely its flaws, but I think the reason why people are talking about it so much is obviously because it's Apple, but at the same time, it was Apple's first time in many years where they kind of stepped out of the box from a design perspective and actually innovated in a number of ways compared to just bumping up the specs year after year and keeping the same design. This phone, of course, has Apple's A11 Bionic chip that is 6-core and is one of the most powerful phones on the market right now. It also finally got Qi wireless charging. There's also the Face ID, which was much talked about, and it works, but it's definitely not something that I prefer over Touch ID. It also has a very solid dual 12-megapixel camera that can also shoot in 4K video, and overall, the iPhone does have a very good camera. It isn't the best on the market, but definitely up there. The design is very beautiful, and the phone is headlined by its 2436 by 1125 OLED display that wraps around the edge, which also did add to some controversy because of the Touch ID, missing home button, and also the weird swipe gestures that you have to get used to. Of course, there is also the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, which has pretty much the same design as before with a piece of glass for wireless charging. You have an upgraded camera on the rear. You also have the same processor as the iPhone X, and for a lot of people, if you want to get a 2017 iPhone, I would actually recommend the iPhone 8 or 8 Plus over the iPhone X, but I will also say that the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus is still an incredible deal, and I would actually say that was a much better value than going ahead and getting a new phone like this. Next up, one of the most complete phones of the year is from Samsung, and that is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. So it is a big phone, so that is something that you have to get used to or enjoy, but just the number of features that this phone has, the number of things that it does very well, just makes it a very easy contender for me. To start out, it has a 2960 by 1440 AMOLED display that is 6.3 inches and has a ratio of 18.5 to 9. And that just essentially goes all the way to the edge. Is one of the most vibrant and beautiful displays you're ever going to see on a smartphone. It also has the latest Snapdragon 835 processor with Adreno 540 GPU, dual 12-megapixel cameras on the back, making it the first Samsung flagship smartphone with dual cameras, which I was waiting for quite a long time. And similar to the display, the photos are very vibrant, sharp, and look great, as you can see here. And really the only complaints on the design at all were the fingerprint sensor placement, because otherwise this phone is so well designed. And you also can't forget about the S Pen features that allow you to draw on the screen, make notes. It works very well and is one of the features that is exclusive to the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 and has attracted a lot of people to this line. The Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus is also very easy for me to recommend, but I believe that for the extra money, I would personally get the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 because you get the dual camera and also the S Pen, and in terms of size, it isn't that much larger. Another set of phones that did cause a lot of discussion when they initially released were the Google Pixel 2 and 2 XL. But after having these phones for about 2 months now and being able to use them, I can tell you that it is actually one of my preferred choices. For its price point, the display definitely got a lot of scrutiny, and I think that is with good reason. It definitely isn't the nicest display out there, and being someone who has tested out literally every good smartphone screen there is, I can tell you that the OLED panel just isn't up to par, and I'm not a big fan of it. But the recent updates that give you more options with the screen definitely did help it out. On the Google Pixel, you have a 5-inch 16:9 display with a 1080p resolution, whereas on the XL, you have a 6-inch 18:9 display that has a resolution of 2880 by 1440. The bezels on the front of both phones definitely should and could be smaller, but I think on the back, this is one of my favorite designs for a smartphone because it just feels very smooth in the hand, but also just looks good. I think the glass patch looks amazing. Of course, this phone has the top specs paired with pure Android, which is the best Android experience in terms of fluidity that you're going to get on any phone. But I think the real reason why I can recommend this phone despite its price point and its shortcomings that other phones may not have is that it simply has, I think, the best camera on any Android phone on the front and back. Just the level of dynamic range, detail, the colors, the way it's able to judge an environment both on the front and back, and also the portrait mode despite it only having one camera is very impressive. And for smartphone photographers out there who take a ton of photos or use their phone for work, then the Google Pixel is definitely a phone that you want to have. My personal favorite line of Android phones this year though is actually the OnePlus 5 and 5T. So I've currently had the 5T for a couple months now, and I think the changes that they made despite OnePlus releasing two phones in the same year are really good. And just from picking it up and using it, I actually think this has one of the best screens because it seems accurate but also vibrant at the same time. Everything is very sharp, but the battery life still lives up on this phone and is powered by an Adreno 540 GPU, Snapdragon 835 processor, which was on pretty much every Android flagship phone this year. You have a dual camera setup on the back with one being 20 megapixels and the other being 16, with one that is better for low light. The phone itself is very solid, the design is great, you also have a headphone jack, and I think OnePlus has just created a smartphone line that appeals to what the consumer wants as opposed to trying to set the tone for the future. The OnePlus 5 also has a near stock Android experience and is one of the smoothest Android phones, almost as smooth as stock Android that I've ever used. And I think the reason why I like the OnePlus line so much isn't because they're the most innovative, because they simply aren't, but they just really listen to the consumer and just integrate things into the smartphone that the consumer wants, the headphone jack being a perfect example. With that being said though, if you want to save some money, then the OnePlus 5 is actually still an excellent option, and it does have a dual camera setup that is 1x and 2x as opposed to one camera being for low light, which I actually prefer. If you guys want to get the thinnest cases possible for your phones though, whether it's the iPhones, Samsungs, Googles, and LGs, even the OnePlus, then Minimal makes some great thin cases that come in at just 0.35 millimeters in thickness. These cases are literally as thin as you could possibly get, as you can see here. They also come in a whole variety of colors and don't attract any fingerprints because they have a nice frosted matte finish, which is something that I enjoy. But they're able to offer scratch protection and minor drop protection for your phone, especially if you want to retain the same form factor that the phone was designed in. It is overall very minimalist, hence its name, and I'll leave a link down below, and I would like to thank them for making this video possible. Moving on to a couple more underrated phones of the year. One of them I think is definitely the LG V30, which was much overlooked by the time it came out. It came out at a time of year where a ton of smartphones came out at the same time, and the G6 wasn't my favorite phone, but after using the LG V30, I think it is better in every way, and LG has done a very good job with this phone. The V30 is once again powered by an 835 Snapdragon processor with an Adreno 540 GPU, and on the front you have a 6-inch 18:9 display with a 2880 by 1440 resolution P-OLED display, which I think looks pretty good. One of the features that this phone has that none on this table have is a Bang & Olufsen certified 32-bit DAC, so if you listen to a lot of music and want to use a headphone jack, then this will provide the best listening experience. It also has wireless charging. The battery life was decent, but what I like that LG has done to the camera is that instead of going with a 1x and 2x, which I still enjoy, it is one of the few phones that has gone for a wide angle lens, and if you've seen photos on the wide angle lens of the G6 or V30, it is very wide. In my case, I use a lot of phones that have the 1x and 2x setup, so I have to carry an external lens and case around with me if I want to do a wider photo. The design on the LG V30 is also very nice. It just feels very uniform and clean. Another set of very underrated phones I would say this year are from Blackberry. There's the Blackberry Key 1 and the Blackberry Motion, and the Key 1 was actually one of my favorite phones because it was just so fun to use. Blackberry's phone this year that has a QWERTY keyboard is much improved compared to the one that came out last year, and I think every intention they had with this phone for its target market has been nailed. The keyboard is very nice to use. It also serves as a trackpad. The display is pretty decent. The battery life is great. The camera is actually the same one as the original Google Pixel, which is really good. It is also very well built and follows the design scheme that we saw on like the previous generation Blackberries, and I think by teaming up with Alcatel, they've come out with something that is very solid and well put together. The Blackberry Motion is also a good choice for someone who doesn't want to pay a flagship price for a phone. It has a full HD display on the front, a 4000 milliamp hour battery, a pretty good camera, a very smooth experience, and it also has a physical home button if that is something that you're used to. For its price though, it does get the job done very well for a business person because it is very well built, has a good battery life, decent screen, and that's all you need to know. I also have a couple phones here that may not have been the most popular in 2017, but I think they give us a good glimpse as to what we should see in the future because of a number of innovations. One of which is the Essential phone, which did have a bit of a rocky start, but I think is becoming much more popular and for good reason. This phone has a 5.71 inch 19:10 ratio display with a 2560 by 1312 resolution. It's IPS and looks amazing. It literally looks like a sticker on the screen, and you can almost say it is a better execution of what Apple did on the display of the iPhone X with a smaller notch but having more space on the top for those swipe gestures. So in Apple's case, they didn't want to sacrifice any space whatsoever on the bottom, but I think Essential has actually done a good job in how they executed the screen, and I'm not really bothered by the thing on the bottom. It once again has a Snapdragon 835 processor with an Adreno 540 GPU, a pretty decent 13 megapixel camera, but most of all, I think the second I picked up this phone, this is one of the most comfortable phones that I've held. It has that kind of uniform finish that goes around the edge that is one material, and I just can't describe it. You kind of just have to go to a store, pick it up, and see for yourself. I'm a pretty big fan of the blocky but curved off feel, and I think this is one of the few phones that I would feel comfortable using without a case. The Essential phone, for example, also had a modular option, which I don't really care for, but I think next year we're definitely going to see more brands experiment with that. At its new discounted price point though, I think it is more justifiable now than ever before. The Xiaomi Mi Mix 2 was also one of those phones that showed the display technology that we should see much more of in the future because each brand just wants to make a beautiful device that they can market easily. I think this phone definitely excels when it comes to design. The screen just goes all the way to the edge, literally with no notch on the top. You do have your camera on the bottom, but I think this phone just looks amazing, and it's also built out of great materials and fits great in the hand. So I think from looking at all these phones, what you're going to notice is that in 2017, pretty much every phone had a good display. It had a decent camera or a very good one. A lot of these phones are also missing headphone jacks, some of them even home buttons. And from a flagship perspective, when it comes to power, they are more than we're really going to need on an everyday basis. What we don't see in every phone though, and what I would like to see next year, is improved battery life, because no phone really has that marathoner status. There are definitely phones that have good battery life, but there isn't a manufacturer here that can confidently say that they have the best battery life on their smartphones, because essentially every phone does have its own sort of trade-off here and there. So I think battery technology is just really behind. I think the most inexcusable change that we need to see on every phone next year though is better speakers. If you look at all the phones on the table, we have 13 of them. The ones that have a good speaker are the Google Pixel 2 and 2 XL, the iPhone X, the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, but otherwise I can't really think of any other phone here that has a good set of speakers. I know there's a Razer phone, but they didn't send me one, so I never got to try it. But otherwise, all of these phones here just have mono down firing speakers, and I think every brand just needs to figure out a way to integrate stereo speakers, because that is much easier to do than trying to figure out a battery technology. Headphone jacks are slowly dying out, yeah, we get it, but at the same time, a lot of people don't have USB-C headphones, or they forget to bring their headphone adapter, so it's more than likely that people are going to be listening to music and videos on their phone speakers more than ever. I think when it comes to displays, we're going to see thinner and thinner bezels, because that's just the way the industry is moving, and companies just want to make a beautiful device, and I totally get that. A lot of phones nowadays are just so solid, and that budget smartphones are going to be a bigger part of market share, because phones are just getting cheaper and better, and there's no question about that just based on what we saw in the recent few years. Otherwise, as always, I've been talking a lot. My current phone that I use on an everyday basis is the iPhone X, for those who are still wondering. And let me know down in the comment section below what your favorite phone is and what feature you want to see in 2018, and I'll see you guys in the next one.